I'm fond of saying, Chris, that Canadians want financial advice. They need financial advice, and they'll pay a fair price for financial advice. And so I think this really is a market environment for all of the unfortunate uncertainties where the value of advice is going to stand out and where stable long-term client and advisor relationships are really going to prove their value. And I think we're going to see that right across IPC.
Hi, I'm Chris Reynolds. And for my entire career, it's been my mission to help independent financial advisors build a better business through a remarkable client experience. In this podcast, you're going to hear from the visionaries, from the leaders, from the independent advisors who are reshaping the future of the financial advice industry. At the end of each episode, I'm going to leave you with at least one winnable idea that you can start implementing right away. Let's turn the page on building a better business. Welcome to Turning the Page. I'm your host, Chris Reynolds, and today we got a very special guest, my good friend, James O Sullivan, both President and CEO of IGM Financial. He's here to tell us all about what's going on in the industry, some of the major trends, some of the things that he's seeing, and really where are we going as an industry in wealth management. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. How are you doing today?
Wonderful, of course. Talking about my favorite subject, which is wealth management, and where we're going. So I think what everyone wants to know from you is, what's the current environment like? What are you seeing out there? I know there's lots going on, both politically, both from an economic standpoint, but also just the general feeling in the wealth management industry. Because you get preview, and for the listeners who don't know, you get to be president CEO over Mackenzie Financial versus Investment Group and IPC. So you get to see a lot of the different areas in the wealth management business. So maybe you could just give the views on what you're seeing right now.
Sure. Well, thanks, Chris. And look, before I begin, Chris, I want to acknowledge your leadership and thank you for your leadership. You founded and built what is a great business. We are honored to be the shareholder or a shareholder of it, and I'm really looking forward to working with you and Blaine and the entire team over the next 10 years, frankly, as we take this business from 30 billion plus to multiples of that, and take earnings from 20 million plus to what we think could be $100 million plus. So congratulations to you and team. You've built a great business, and we're really serious about kind of doubling down here and seeing what we can turn IPC into over the next several years with your leadership and Blaine's and the entire team. So very much looking forward to that. In terms of the current environment, well, I was reflecting on this, as I was driving home last night, Chris, that in some respects, the current environment, notwithstanding the enormity of the geopolitical turmoil, the macroeconomic uncertainty, and the concerns around the impact of monetary policy, notwithstanding all of that, to be perfectly honest, this market environment feels more normal to me than the past 2 years did.
I would agree with that. I would absolutely agree with that.
It's the last 2 years that really felt kind of odd and out of sorts. And while we've got some particularly extreme issues to deal with, war in Europe being at the top of the list, from a macroeconomic perspective and a markets perspective, this feels closer to normal, in my view, than the past 2 years did. And, I think that's good and bad. I mean, look, the last 2 years were obviously a wonderful run, and everyone was making money and things were going up, and it was a bit of an effortless exercise overall. But I think this is the kind of market environment where we earn our money. This is the kind of market environment where the value of advice really stands out, and where clients really do see and appreciate the value of advice. I'm fond of saying, Chris, that Canadians want financial advice. They need financial advice, and they'll pay a fair price for financial advice. And so I think this really is a market environment for all of the unfortunate uncertainties where the value of advice is going to stand out, and where stable long-term client and advisor relationships are really going to prove their value. And I think we're going to see that right across IPC.
Actually, I agree wholeheartedly, James. In fact, I don't know if you even know this, but I was actually on the Value of Advice task force that was set up through IFIC many years ago now. But one of the things that they found is, where is the value of financial advice? And so they did a study between people who had advisors and didn't have advisors. And although there was lots of differences, one of the main differences they pointed to is people who had advisors actually nagged them to success. And what I mean by that, it sounds harsh, nagging, but that's what they mean is, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm going to do my will. Nobody wakes up in the morning and today I'm setting up a trust fund for my children. It's through advice that people do those things, and they probably would not have done them without an advisor. And therefore, that is why people who work with advisors do so much better financially than people who don't. I want to carry on from what we were talking about, James, because it was good. It's, it is an interesting time. It's, as the Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. These are certainly interesting times, but also things are changing. We're seeing a lot of change, some rapid, some slowly, but I'm going to go through some of the major shifts in the independent wealth management area. And certainly, where do you think the next growth is going to come from? Like, where do you see, if I was somebody in wealth management, certainly an independent financial advisor, where do you think I'm going to see my growth in the next 5 years, let's say?
Well, look, I do think we have to, the backdrop matters. Canada is a developed market. It's a mature market. The wealth industry generally in Canada is quite mature. So, I mean, I think that does establish some boundaries around reasonable, expectations for growth. What I've always loved about this industry, though, Chris, is that it's got what I would describe as three very natural sources of growth. It grows with markets, and over time, markets go up. It grows with new client acquisition, and there's always an opportunity to acquire new clients, whether that's kind of demographically through immigration and a rising population, or whether it's taking clients from the competition across the street. So you've got rising markets, you've got client acquisition, and businesses that wealth practices that are run well should have revenues going up faster than expenses. So you've got operating leverage as well. And I think for those three reasons, this is an industry that historically has been able to grow at attractive rates, both on a consolidated basis, the IPC level, and that's also true at the individual practice level, where businesses are well run. So I think the backdrop is a favorable backdrop. And I think where advisors are going to add value to position themselves, in particular, to take share, I keep coming back to the value of advice. I really and truly believe. We can talk about technology, we can talk about product, and those are very, very important factors as well. But it's that quality of the relationship between the advisor and the client. It's what happens at that rock face between the client and the advisor that is so important. Even though I've been in this industry now for 30 plus years, I'm not afraid to admit that I've made some of the same mistakes that many retail advisors regularly make. I've seen things go kind of haywire on a Friday, and then the pundits come out on Saturday and say the sky is falling, and I'm on the phone to my advisor Monday morning saying, "Get me out of this."
Yeah, sell.
And that's not well understood by a whole bunch of people, is that it's the disciplines around the basic stuff that matter so much. And I don't think the regulators, for instance, fully appreciate that, but it's that discipline of saving, that discipline of investing, of being diversified, of thinking about risk, the discipline of not panicking, and that understanding that time is your friend. And I just think that great advisors, if you combine those basic disciplines with a financial plan at the front end, I think that's where an enormous amount of the value is created and added. And I think that's what's going to allow advisors to, to build and grow great practices. And then if you're able to couple that with great technology and great product, that's a home run.
Right. You got it all covered.
You got it all. So now we've got a great relationship grounded in trust, grounded in solid advice and a financial plan. And now we couple that with technology that's changing our lives and product that needs to evolve and is evolving. And I think it's a winning combination. And so, we can talk about technology and product as well. Chris, technology is, it's changing your life. It's changing my life. It's allowing us to have this conversation and deliver the podcast kind of in this forum. But I think technology is going to be a big factor in this industry. One of the questions I love asking people, Chris, and I'll ask you, is because you get such great answers. What are your favorite apps on your phone? What are your go-tos, Chris?
That is interesting, but the one that I just tend to go to all the time is Flipboard. And I don't know if you know Flipboard, but Flipboard, basically, if you whatever topics interest you, and I have a wide variety of things that interest me, whether it's travel or wine or food or sometimes business, it will actually suck all the articles that you've put into it and provide you with your own customized newspaper on a daily basis, and constantly being updated based on only the topics that you're very interested in. How about you? What's your favorite app? That's a great question. I'm going to use that on this podcast.
Well, look, I want to share with you a friend of mine at the bank, his favorite app, and I was surprised it was his favorite app, but when you think about it, it's just so practical. I think it was called Umbrella, and it only did one thing. Before you left the house each morning, you click on this app, and it tells you whether to pack your umbrella for the day. That's it.
Genius.
How good is that?
Yeah.
So I don't know where to start. Several years ago, I'd have had a few favorite apps, and now I have so many. But look, I love Waze. Now, why do I love Waze? I love Waze not because it always gives me the right route. It doesn't. But more or less, it tells me when I'm going to get home or when I'm going to get to the office. And you know what? That takes half the stress.
Right.
Out of getting home or getting to the office is knowing that more or less I'm going to be there around this time. So I love Waze. I love Uber. I mean, Uber has improved our ability to get around major cities to just to a completely remarkable extent. I do love Twitter. I don't tweet personally, but I use Twitter to curate both news and opinion that I care to listen to. I actually found Twitter. Like people have all kinds of experiences with Twitter, and it's at the center of a bunch of stuff that's not great and in fact dividing society. But it does give you the opportunity to kind of intelligently, if you choose to be intelligent about it, intelligently curate kind of who you're listening to. So during COVID and during the pandemic, I was able to zero in on a group of medical professionals, public health officials that I respected and admired, and was able to kind of form my own view. So Twitter is a big one for me. There's just, there's so many now, and it would be easier if I had my phone in front of me. But this technology, my point is technology is changing our personal lives, and it's changing financial services. And I think, one of the things that we have been very committed to, as you know, is investing in technology. And that will absolutely continue, because while I would argue that's not as important as the relationship, it's not as important as the plan or advice, but it's just a giant enabler. And it's really become something that I think clients expect now of everyone they interact with is a good digital experience. So technology is a very important part of this.
Well, I do think, I completely agree that it's a driver. And one of the things it has done, certainly over the pandemic, is allow us to give high quality advice when people are at home without having the face-to-face interaction. Like, our industry really didn't miss a beat in the ability to provide good guidance to clients. And I think we're going to see that level of guidance continue in the future, even as things return to whatever they call normal these days. Is it allows, to your point, communication. Technology allows easier forms of communication, which is what our business is all about. How do we better communicate with our clients?
Yeah, and you make an important point. We should count our blessings. Our industry fared extremely well during COVID, and not all industries did, obviously. And technology was the great enabler of it. Who would have thought that we could go home for 2 years and the industry could have the record years that it did? Again, we should count our blessings for that. And then, of course, Chris. So let's add it up. We've got great. We need great advice. We need great technology, and we need great product.
Right.
And I do think there's an important trend in the industry, of kind of narrowing the shelf or shrinking the shelf, having a curated shelf that is intelligently kind of constructed, and where the advisor and the house really understand the profile of what's on the shelf. But increasingly, there's a demand and a huge opportunity to introduce alternatives through our shows to retail investors. And that's something we've been very focused on at the IGM level. And so we purchased Northleaf. Northleaf is, as you know, the third largest alts platform in Canada. Now, Brookfield's a lot bigger and Onyx is a lot bigger, but Northleaf is a big platform, 20 billion in assets across private equity, infrastructure, and private credit. And we have already created products that we're selling through Mackenzie. And we've already created some product that we've moved into IG Wealth. And I think there's a wonderful opportunity for IPC as well to, work with Northleaf and really start to help advisors answer the question that I know their clients are asking them, which is, where's my alternatives? Where's my private markets exposure? And certainly, if we're in for an inflationary period here, and it appears we are, I think there's going to be lots of room for alternatives, including, for instance, infrastructure, floating rate private credit. I mean, there's products that are going to perform well in that environment.
Absolutely, and very different. And it's about being a little bit more innovative than we've had to be in the past. All the traditional asset classes are not necessarily going to solve the problems all the time. We have to start looking outward. We have to start being a little bit more creative than we think we have in the past.
Yeah.
Taking it in a little bit different direction, but certainly one we talk about quite a bit is, sort of the succession planning in our industry and how important that is to especially in the independent wealth channel. We have a very aging advisor population. Something like 50% of the assets are held by advisors over the age of 60, and that's quite substantial. And the other challenge I think our industry has is young people coming into the business. How do they take over these practices? And maybe you can comment on some of the trends that you're seeing and some of our solutions.
Well, as you know, Chris, I really think this is the future of IPC, is solving for succession. And I don't mean solving for succession with a singular kind of monolith model. Here's what succession looks like. But solving for succession by saying, here's 2 or 3 new kind of industry archetypes that we're investing in, and 2 or 3 different ways for you to think about succession within your practice. Because this is an industry that was built in the 80s and in the early 90s, and it was built by a generation that, well, I don't know, Chris, you and I might be part of it, but it was built by a generation not too far, anyways, away from retirement, or certainly thinking about retirement. And I think that creates very, very real opportunity for us to develop in different industry models. I mean, I'll give you an example. I think again, I said earlier that the wealth industry in Canada is a developed country. The wealth industry is relatively mature. And so I think, the industry quite naturally was founded by people who were very, very entrepreneurial. Okay.
Right.
Because that's where Canada was more like that. The industry was more like that. It was kind of ripe for entrepreneurs. Now it's in a more mature phase, and so not everyone is going to want kind of the same model. Not everyone is going to want kind of direct drive. Some people are going to want different models, and so I think that's the opportunity for us really to kind of think about what does the future of the industry look like as it evolves, as it becomes more mature. And along the way, how can we help advisors, achieve succession in a way that works for them and works for their clients?
Absolutely. As I said, I do think it's a big issue, and it's especially important for advisors who are very successful. To your point, they're almost victims of this success. How do they make sure that their legacy lives on, and make sure that their clients are looked after, make sure their families are looked after? So, to your point, it's a big puzzle to solve, but I think that's something that we really focus on as an organization.
Yeah, no, and look, that's where we're going to be. That's one of the areas where we're going to be investing capital. Is really focusing on succession and helping advisors on the way through.
Perfect. So now I'm going to take you into our next segment in our little podcast here, which we call Rapid Fire. And so I'm going to give you a series of 3 questions, and the first thing that pops into your head. Well, the first question is, what do you love doing?
So, Chris, I love my work. And I almost pause in saying I love my work because I know some people will say, well, there's another fellow that doesn't have great work-life balance. I would say to you, I totally disagree. I totally disagree. I derive enormous pleasure and satisfaction from my work. I've always believed that the reason we're here broadly is to achieve our full potential as individuals and contribute to the welfare of others. And you know what? This industry, this company, this environment we're in gives us every opportunity to do that. So, for my family's obviously first and foremost, but Chris, I love my work.
I love it. So, you've had a long and illustrious career. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received in your career?
So the best piece of advice I ever received, and it's probably the piece of advice I share with young people, because as you know, I had the privilege of teaching a course at Osgoode Hall Law School, and I turned it into a whole bunch of fireside chats with business and law leaders across the country. I think the most important thing that I share with students, boy, it's hard to narrow it to one, but here's one. Be really fussy about who you work with, particularly early in your career. Those years are so formative, and you're coming out of a great education, but boy, there's a big difference between being a student in university and getting into the workforce proper and establishing and building a career. And just as when you're a kid, your friends have an enormous influence, right? And it always frustrates your parents because your parents are thinking, why aren't we the biggest influence?
Right.
Friends tend to be a big influence. It's true at work too, is that who you choose to surround yourself with, the culture of the organization you choose to be employed with or work with, has a huge impact on the middle of your career and your later career. So be fussy about who you work with and make sure there's shared values, strong leadership, good mentorship, and that you're continuing to learn at least as much as you learned on the way through university.
That is very good piece of advice, and one I don't think that I've heard before. And I've asked this question to almost everybody. And the last thing is, what do you want to be remembered for? At the end of your career, what is it? What is the one thing that you'd like people to remember that James was?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be remembered for leaving IGM stronger than I found it, and leaving IPC stronger than I found it. I have a very balanced view of that. I want to build a better firm. I want to build a better firm for our employees, for our advisors, for our clients, and for our shareholders. So Chris, I wake up every day and you know, and as I go through the day, it's all about decisions and trade-offs, right? And but I think if for however long I'm in this chair, at the end of it, I can look back and say, you know what, this is a better organization. It's better for clients, advisors, shareholders, employees. Then that'll be a total win. And just to reinforce what I said earlier, you know, I do think we have an obligation in our lives to contribute to the welfare of others. That's through charitable giving. That's through serving on boards of not-for-profits and the like. And I think these roles that you have and that I have certainly open the door to that. And I think that's an important part of it as well. But look, along the way, Chris, I'm just going to love it. And I do love it. This is such a high quality. You built a very, very high quality organization. And the entirety of IGM Financial, IPC, IG Wealth Management, Mackenzie, Northleaf, and so on. Very high quality organization, a great board, a great controlling shareholder, a great family behind the controlling shareholder. And so, you know, in a word, this whole thing is a journey through quality, and I'm loving it, and I'm looking forward to working with you and team. And as I said, taking that 20 million of earnings and turning it into 100.
Well, you and me both, James. In the next segment, I'm going to give my little, you haven't heard it before, but I've been famous for my rants. I've been writing rants for probably 20 years on the industry and various things going on. You know, so what I glean from our conversation here today is, you know, do what you love. I always say the greatest quote I've ever heard is, if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. If it's something that you do, even if you weren't getting paid, that's where you found your career, your calling in life, and how you help people. And so, you know, to all the listeners, are you doing what you love? Are you really focused on the things that you love, that you're good at, that you're contributing back to your clients, to society, to your company, to your family? And I think if you can do that, you've made it in life. So I think it's been very insightful, James. Thank you very much for joining us. I know our listeners will love it. Anything to add before we leave our listeners?
No, I mean, I agree 100% with what you said, Chris. And I would add just one tiny caveat.
Right.
Make sure you're good at what you love. Because then if you're good at what you love and you really love it, boy, you're right. You're not gonna work. It's gonna be a trip, and it's going to be a pleasure. And my career has been that thus far. I know you well enough to know that the passion that you show day in and day out for this business reflects the fact that you love it and you're good at it.
Well, and there's one more caveat to that. Actually, if you think about it, and I've read this from good to great, you have to love it. You have to be good at it, but it also has to drive your economic engine. Because if it doesn't drive your economic engine, it's called a hobby. So
very, very true.
So make sure it also drives your economic engine.
Yeah. But again, this industry offers all three.
Absolutely. I truly believe this is the best industry that there is. It's one that you can really give back and create value for others, as well as drive your own economic engine. So folks, my key takeaway for today is remember this: do what you love, make sure you're good at that, and that it drives your economic engine. Those are the three secrets to success. Thank you very much for joining another edition of Turning the Page. I'm your host, Chris Reynolds, and I'll see you next time. So if you've liked what you've heard today, do us a favor and hit subscribe. That way you'll find another episode and another actionable takeaway on how to keep building a better business.